This is Insight. Insight is a public affairs program with a focus on issues important to the western slope of Colorado. Insight is produced by Tyler Franzen and Libby Pelletier and is a production of MBC Grand Broadcasting. On this week's edition of Insight,
this is Greg Haitz, running for Mesa County Treasurer.
Joining us this week, Greg Haitz, a candidate for Mesa County Treasurer, running as a Republican. Greg, thanks so very much for talking with me this week. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Let's first kind of dive in. A question that we've kind of asked, we've talked with a couple other candidates that are also running. And the thing that we've kind of learned as we've done some of these interviews is that this is a uniquity, that there haven't been races previously for Mesa County Treasurer that have featured multiple candidates or as many candidates as this year. And so the first question I have for you is, from your perspective as someone running in this race, why do you think this race in particular for Mesa County Treasurer has attracted as many candidates to it as it has?
I think it might have something to do with the political climate. We've seen the same thing on city council races and even school board races. My observation has been in the past that oftentimes some of these races go uncontested. Sometimes even last minute you might have someone decide to jump in a race. But I think it's a national trend. It's definitely a local trend that we're seeing just more and more people participating, which I think is good. Getting more people involved and interested in public service.
And then for you specifically, what about the position of treasurer was a draw for you? Why did you feel that this was a position that you could not only run for, but let's say if you do get elected, why would you be in a good position to be a treasurer? What about treasurer specifically drew you to run as a candidate?
Yeah, it's definitely not a sexy position. I'd say it's probably not on most people's radar. It's not really a partisan or a political position. The position is pretty much, you're a department head running a county department. It is an elected position, but, you're really a department head, so it's very much administrative. It's not you're not in there, creating policy or changing laws or anything like that. So I did the Inside Mesa County class. I've done it twice now. It's a great program. Stephanie Reese puts it on each week. And it's free to the public. I think they cap it at maybe 20 participants, but it's usually in late springtime. It's a class a week. Each week, you go down to the old courthouse. It might be a different elected official or department head. We'll do a presentation on, what their department does, what their elected office does, kind of the ins and outs. There's time for Q&A. And then you go on a tour of the landfill. You go on a tour of the jail, justice services. I think there's another maybe IT department tour in there. And so it's a great educational opportunity for Mesa County residents. Really gets them more civically engaged. You get to see literally inside Mesa County government, all the inner workings. And so I've done that twice now. And the second time through, I kind of had more of a, hey, let's really figure out all these different, county positions and elected official positions. And Sheila Reiner, she was the treasurer at the time. And so there towards the end of the class, I was asking her, a bunch of different questions about her particular position, because I enjoy finance. I enjoy numbers. I'm good with spreadsheets and math and all that kind of stuff. And so I asked her a few more questions, and then she texted me later. She's like, hey, Greg, are you thinking about running for treasurer? And I said, well, the thought has crossed my mind, but, I probably want to know more about it. So her and I have been chatting now pretty much since then. That's been a while ago. And so she brought me in to help with interviews. They were hiring a treasurer tech, I think is what they call the position. And so on occasion, they like to bring in local private citizens to come in and help with those interviews. They do group interviews, and so I was able to go in and help with that. So anyway, through all of that, treasurer just seemed like a good kind of way to enter into public office, on the county level. I've run my own business for over 20 years now. I'm good with financial documents. I'm good with budgets, making payroll, running, large teams. I've been treasurer on different boards over the years. I served on the Colorado Chiropractic Association board of directors for 10 years. I was its president for a year. And when I first came on, they were in almost financial ruin. So we had to go scorched earth and rejigger a bunch of numbers and get the organization back up and running. And I think at that point they were down to like $10,000 in their bank account. Now they operate on, I think it's a $500,000 budget each year. And so I have a lot of experience, running organizations. I'm very familiar with, P&Ls and pro formas and all those kinds of things. And so it felt like a natural fit for me just with my past experience, my personality style, and so forth.
Your primary opponent right now coming up in the Republican race is Rose Puglisi. She has experience as a county commissioner and also in the state legislature. She's also worked as a county attorney. And your political experience may not quite necessarily compare to hers, although your wife has served previously with the District 51 school board. And so there's a little bit of a connection there. What separates you from experience-wise from your direct Republican opponent, Rose Puglisi? What separates you two?
Yeah, so I appreciate Rose's, past experience. As county commissioner, she was one of 3 commissioners. I believe they have 1, maybe 2 employees, the county administrator and I think the county attorney that answer to them. But otherwise, it's a very different position. You're county commissioner, so you're advocating for policy, maybe looking at tax rate changes. You're in control of Haber refunds. They just issued a 10% reduction in workforce and in budgets. They're in a hiring freeze. So there's each department comes to the county commissioners with their proposed budget for the year, and then see if the county commissioners approve it. The last treasurer, they wanted more robust software that interconnects between the assessor's office and the treasurer's office. So Sheila Reiner advocated for that, but ultimately that was county commissioners, job to approve that budget item. I think it was $600,000. And so it's really different roles. County commissioner, like I said, you're in policy. It's very political. The treasurer, it's administrative. You're running a team. You've got, employees. You're hiring. You're firing. It's very technical. This software that they purchased, that's going to roll out next year in 2027. So whoever the new treasurer needs to be, able to implement this new software program from Tyler Industries. And so I have a lot of experience in that kind of stuff. Like I said, I appreciate Rose's experience, but it is very different than running a department, running a team. I don't know that she's ever had employees before, other than, like I said, the county administrator and attorney. But like I said, this is running a department, so it's much more administrative. So I'd say that's maybe what separates us. She has, political experience, being a House Minority Leader and county commissioner, whereas I have more, 20 plus years of administrative experience, both on, statewide boards as well as in my own business, running large organizations and large teams.
And you've mentioned it, that because this is much more of an administrative role, kind of a more statutory role than it is in terms of policy, you would not necessarily have a direct voice in policy changes per se. You would be kind of, like you said, more administrative and facilitator. That being said, from your perspective, is there a fiscal issue in Mesa County directly, or in Mesa County specifically, that you think the county treasurer would want to take a look at, and someone in your position as a candidate, a fiscal issue in Mesa County that you're maybe passionate about, or at the very least that you're hyper aware of, that you want to bring to the attention of county commissioners if you are in the position of treasurer?
Yeah, I think there's always opportunities there, just because it's more of an administrative role. You're still an elected official who answers, primarily to the voters and to the taxpayers. And so, one opportunity in particular that's, showed up on my radar about 6 months ago was looking at how the treasurer invests taxpayer dollars. And again, it's all very specific in statute, as far as how, liquidity, what kind of investment vehicles are appropriate and not appropriate. But currently we're not really getting any interest revenue on our checking account, and there can be anywhere from 50 to 60 million, in that account, rolling in and out at any particular time. And so one of the things I'd advocate for is going out for an RFP to see if any local banks in particular. I'd love to work with local banks. I know we work with Alpine and I think maybe Bank of the West. but just put an RFP out to just see, competitively, are those banks or any other banks willing to give us a little bit better, return? I mean, even if it's, 1 to 3% interest, I mean, that could be hundreds of thousands or even a million or two a year, just an extra revenue just from those interest payments on that money that we're holding. And so that'd be one example of something that'd be, a fiscal thing that the treasurer could put out and pursue. It wouldn't necessarily be, policy change per se. But this just in general, as treasurer, you would be part of what they call Team Mesa, which is all local officials. This is the direction the county's heading in. We always want to be, fiscally conservative and really try to stretch the taxpayer dollars as far as we can. And so I think even though the treasurer is not advocating for policy all the time, I think being part of Team Mesa, you can still be advocating for the overall vision and outlook for the counties.
We've asked this question about a topic that is relevant, I think, because it continues to grow and expand, and there's a lot of talk on the national scale about the use of AI and the use of data in that respect when it comes to just about everything these days, money being one of those sectors. There's a lot of statutory issues and not really a lot of clarity from a legal standpoint as far as what government can or cannot use AI for. In your experience and in your position as a candidate, where do you think, if there is any role whatsoever for AI to be used in either the treasurer's office or just in local government generally, do you see a role for that potentially, or do you think that that's something that you maybe would want to steer away from?
Oh, there's definitely a role, and the county's already tipped their toe into the AI pool, if you will. So I currently sit on Mesa County Planning Commission, and so we hear a lot of, rezones and land development and whatnot come before us. And in the planning department, so say if you want to do a subdivision, you bring in, your plat and then your plans for the subdivision. And then the planner takes it. It takes 30, 40 minutes at a time, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours to really go through it all, look at it, make sure, T's are crossed, I's are dotted. Well, the county commissioners just approved, I think it was last year, maybe last summer, new AI software for the planning department where you can bring in your plat and your application. They have AI scan it, and it'll, see if it matches up with the land development code and the master plan and so forth. And it can be done in like 5 minutes. And so that alone is going to save the planning department, hundreds of hours a month potentially. So that's just an easy example of very kind of low end AI and how it can, you just kind of plug in the prompts, you plug in land development code, and then it can just go through that plat and decide, is everything in place, or are there still 4 things that are outstanding? So I think there's definitely a place for AI in local government, especially if it can create efficiencies, do the job a little bit better, maybe free up a little bit more staff time to do more customer service. So, I mean, it's very new, right? And I think we always want to approach it with caution, but it's not going anywhere. And, not that we're competing with other governments or other counties per se, but we definitely don't want to be left in the dust if AI can be helpful and other counties are implementing it, and then we're just sitting on our hands.
There is a cliche out there that goes, all politics are local, and there is a very good argument out there about how local politics are much more impactful to people's lives on the daily and in a more human scale than even national politics. That all being said, Mesa County, in its own unique way, has had a little bit of a brush-in with national politics with respect to the Tina Peters case. And for a lot of people that I've talked to, they said that whole case and the saga with the legal that followed left a bad taste in people's mouths and really kind of soured them on government and elected officials and things of that sort. For you, running a campaign for Mesa County Treasurer, what would be something that if you were to be elected Mesa County Treasurer, something that you would want to do to put people's minds at ease or to potentially bridge the community and sort of regain some public trust for people who have had, like I said, a sour taste in their mouth left behind from the actions of previous elected officials here in Mesa County?
Yeah, I mean, there's always an opportunity, I guess, to have those conversations. As treasurer, I don't know that I'll have a huge, pulpit to speak from on that. I assume I'll be pretty busy in the day-to-day stuff. But I think in general, when you're campaigning, it seems like that's when messaging can be the most effective. And so, I've had people ask me about Tina Peters and election integrity. And I think, at the end of the day, Mesa County does a really good job. Bobby Gross runs a really tight department down there as clerk and recorder. I had a gentleman the other day that had some election integrity questions, and I said, you know what, let's just go down to the clerk's office and let's get a tour of elections, and I'm sure Bobby can answer any questions you have. And, she spent over 2 hours with us. And by the end of it, the guy's like, well, I still have some concerns about, this and that. But he's like, but not in Mesa County. He's like, it just really seems like you guys are running a really tight ship. And Bobby, she really goes above and beyond. She does more than a lot of counties do when it comes to just making sure that voter rolls are clean, their systems are working good. So I think those kinds of things, just having those conversations around, hey, if you have questions about election integrity, go talk to the clerk, get a tour, have her show you what's going on, or volunteer and become an election judge or a poll watcher. So there's a lot of opportunities, but I think, it's still lingering, if you will. I know there's still some people that are concerned about their vote. Is it going to get stolen or not? And there's only so much you can do for everyone's concerns. But I think in general, as candidates and as elected officials, I think we can encourage folks that like, hey, we're doing a really good job here in Mesa County. It's important to stay involved. It's important to not feel disenfranchised. Your vote's going to get counted, and there's ways to make sure that it does. So I think having those conversations and continuing to have those conversations is going to be important.
I want to go back to your experience. You touched on it a little bit that you had previously served with the, and I might get the name of the organization wrong, but it was the Colorado Chiropractors. You served on the board there. You've also been a part of some other groups from your business side of things. And so let's talk about just generally your experience. What experiences do you bring as a candidate that would go well and work well effectively in a position like county treasurer?
Yeah, we can definitely touch back on that. It's probably been 12 years ago, I came onto the Colorado Chiropractic Association. It's a statewide trade organization for chiropractors in Colorado. And so our organization, it's headquartered in Denver, so I drove over every month for years. So I've kind of had my fill of Denver for a while, but great experience. And like I said, a lot of financial mismanagement. Our executive director was embezzling. It was an absolute mess. And so first got on the board, we had 10 grand or less in the bank. And so we, fired the office cleaners. We had to lay off a staff member. So it was just literally myself, our executive director, and then a few board members. And then we got it back up to where, we had, I think, 25 board members. Half were board members, the other half were alternate board members. I think we're now up to 3 or 4 staff members. We have an entire lobbying firm that we employ they do phenomenal work for us. During my tenure, I went through the ranks, came on as just an alternate director, worked myself up to a regional director or District 7 director, which is Mesa County, and then worked my way up to the executive board, treasurer, vice president, and then immediate past president. So I had a kind of a separate tenure on the executive board. And then, we got the organization back to good financial ground. Like I said, they're kicking butt now. They're doing really good. We've got membership just continues to grow. There was a lot of concern about the organization. We're the only state organization for chiropractors, and so we have to advocate for our profession, for all kinds of insurance, fair insurance practices. Like I said, we have a lobbying team. I'm also on the legislative committee for that organization, so we watch bills, we scan bills every spring during the legislative session. And so all that experience, has helped me in knowing how to run an organization. Sometimes you got to tighten up the belt. If the economy, is going into a recession, now all of a sudden we need to, be able to do the same amount with less. And so I've had a lot of those experiences. And then I also serve on my church's finance board. And so same thing, I just tend to naturally be attracted to these positions. Oftentimes it's more of you're going to be asked to be on this because, you've got a certain affinity to it. But so I serve on my church's finance board, and, we look over the church's finances, P&Ls, payroll, land acquisition. We're looking to build a new building in the next 5 years. So doing, capital campaigns, fundraisers, stuff like that. And then, my work on Mesa County Planning Commission, having the public come before you. Someone wants to do a land development, but someone, that lives next door doesn't want them to build there. And so then they come before us in public meetings. You have to hear them out, following Robert's Rules of Order, running those board meetings. And so I've had, tons of experience there. And that's just what I've been doing for, the last 15, 20 years in different capacities. And then, like I said, running my own chiropractic clinic with a large team here. Also have a separate real estate business. We have investment properties, and I also help my wife with her real estate business. She's a realtor over at Bray Realty, and she does a lot of commercial real estate now. And so, just understanding how those numbers work, leases and rents and all of it. I've been in the numbers game for, like I said, 20 plus years now.
We have less than a minute here, so I'm going to ask you my final question in 30 seconds or less. Why should people vote for Greg Haitz to be Mesa County's treasurer?
Yeah, so I'm a local guy. I've run my own business here for over 20 years. I go to church here. I've raised my family here. I've grown my businesses here. I'm not going anywhere. I have no plans to go anywhere. I'm one of those guys that when I really research something and I decide I'm going to do it, I'm all in. I'm here to stay. I'm not going to change my mind. I'm not going to go look for the next shiny thing. And so if you vote for me, you're voting for a local guy that's here, has plans to stay here. I've got roots here. And I'd love to be your next Mesa County Treasurer.
Greg Haitz, candidate for Mesa County Treasurer. Thank you so very much for joining me this week.
Thank you, sir.
If you have any suggestions for story ideas to cover on Insight, email our MBC Grand News Department at news@gjradio.com. Insight is a public affairs program that airs Sunday mornings on MBC Grand Broadcasting stations in the Grand Valley of Western Colorado in places like Grand Junction, Delta, Montrose, Rifle, and Glenwood Springs.
This is Insight. Insight is a public affairs program with a focus on issues important to the western slope of Colorado. Insight is produced by Tyler Franzen and Libby Pelletier and is a production of MBC Grand Broadcasting.